Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Welcome back. Here we go. Hope you're doing well. Unless you're Raphael Grossi, of course. Then we can only say nasty things because that's what nasty people deserve. I was farting around before the show started, and sometimes it's a good thing, sometimes it's a bad thing. I'm just going to go through about 8 or 9 stories before we get into today's current news cycle. The government standards for radioactive cesium came to an effect on April 2012, so they were shipping food from the nuclear wasteland all the way up until April, a whole year, with no standards, no rules, no regulations, basically. And then the standards, of course, they're only looking at radioactive cesium is not a standard. It's a betrayal, right? Can we afford to be afraid of nuclear power? This creature, remember this creature, Tim Gregory from UK? Splitting atoms in nuclear power stations, causing the climate to change. That's the story, because after 80 years of emissions, visible snowstorms for 80 years coming from 1,000 fuel pools, and that's the reason we got that poll tonight, has 80 years of radioactive fallout from 1,000 fuel pools, nuclear fuel pools, destroyed Earth's ability to produce and sustain life. And that's what that song was all about, The Blob. The blob was the radioactive plume. It was a blob of radiation, is what it was. There was a blob, but it was a blob of radiation that eventually consumed the whole ocean. I don't know what to use. Do I use that alien hand? Do I use the alien hand? I got a bunch of different... I usually use the Lloyd, right? Some obnoxious stuff. Like that. It's a little bit noisy. So let me try one more. Let me see. Some pretty cool stuff. Some not so cool stuff. I used to like that radio tower. I thought that was a good transition. It's been a long time since we used that. Remember the South Korean president who denied Fukushima happened? Where's he to? I got that there somewhere, don't I? That's a different story. We'll get there. South Korean current president, this is 2025 story, May 20th, 2025, and the current prime minister of the country, South Korea, was in jail for sedition, for invoking martial law because protesters wouldn't leave him alone. And reviewing a claim made by the People Party candidate Kim Moon-soo during debate regarding the safety of nuclear power plants. Because the current administration in South Korea is very pro-nuclear. And so there was a televised debate where one of the candidates, Kim Moon-soo, suggested nuclear plants are safe enough excuse me, even a nuclear bomb wouldn't affect them. Think about that statement. So I've been to nuclear power plants and I've been to the Institute for Nuclear Safety. And even if a nuclear bomb like the one dropped in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which in his version is small, apparently he doesn't know much about Nagasaki or Hiroshima, is detonated in the vicinity of a nuclear power plant, the parts of the reactor that would respond automatically to the explosion would not be damaged or malfunction. Remember that story? In order to be a prime minister or president of a country, a lot of countries, you've got to lick some serious boots. Remember this story here from Nano Nuclear Energy? Portable nuclear reactors are now available for your home. That's This was media, Fox News, was it, or something? Can't remember. Oldies but goodies. Robotic arm struggles to take fuel samples from Fukushima plant. Was under development since 2018. They spent $53 million in U.S. money, taxpayer money, into the arm and its related project. So this is what the arm looks like. And it lowers, like a fishing rod, and it lowers this down here. This is just a pincher, and it just randomly grabs. And so less than a gram the last time for $53 million. Of course, if they had it covered in duct tape, they would have got a few ounces of radioactive debris instead of less than a gram. It's like the idea is to distract you from reactor 3 and 4, for instance. Christian Science Monitor, Japan nuclear crisis, is massive water dump making any difference? This was the Union of Unconcerned Scientists. Though spent fuel would spend, the engineers decades ago, engineers thought spent fuel would spend only a few weeks on site before being shipped to a reprocessing plant elsewhere. Like you can't take fuel out of the reactor core and then ship it somewhere. It doesn't work that way. It has to sit there for about a decade in the fuel pool, splitting atoms into your environment. But that's the Union of Unconcerned Scientists. That's the experts who are still active. Okay, so let's talk about United Nations for a couple of seconds before we get into the rest, into the current. It's kind of important sometimes to remind people that this is the stuff the nuclear industry says, which is absolutely ludicrous and that has never been challenged. Japan gets UN nuclear watchdog approval for water release, which is an insane statement because Japan, and so Grossi said Japan would have the final say on the release. In other words, they're not a regulatory agency, right? And so when you talk about water being released, you got to realize the reactors were gone in 5 days, right? They covered it up successfully. Right, think about that picture there. That's reactor 3 to your left and reactor 4 behind me. So they put these contraptions they built off-site on top of the reactors. You won't see none of these pictures anywhere else, by the way. Let me get it away so you can get a screen capture in case you want to later. See all the debris behind we're onto? The buildings underneath it look like this. These contraptions were built off-site and then assembled with remote-controlled cranes and by robots, the homeless and destitute and the victims of society. United Nations give Japan a stamp of approval for Fukushima water. They guaranteed nothing would get out. And remember this mockery of reality. International Atomic Energy Agency assures the safety of the water release from the Fukushima Daiichi site. So, how are you going to assure the safety, which was 12 years later, when after this has already happened? As if nothing got off the site. That's the takeaway from what they're suggesting, right? And Grossi, Raphael Grossi, emphasized in the International Degenerate Agency report that its document is neither a recommendation nor an endorsement. But they guarantee it. But it's not a recommendation or endorsement, but they guarantee the safety of the water. And the Japanese government, the Jap government has the final, let me get that out of the way for you, the Geiger counter, the final say on the issue. Experts' reaction: treated Fukushima wastewater, calling this wastewater from nuclear meltdowns. Like, there is no filtration system. The Riva system, French system, couldn't work. They didn't even turn it on. Here they say the water, the tritium, was equivalent to a bite of a banana. This is how they were selling the lie in 2023. These are the experts. Bananas, potassium got nothing, doesn't get created in a nuclear reactor. Civil group finds high levels of radiation up to 20 millisieverts per year. This is 2012 at a Japanese school after restrictions were lifted in a nuclear waste. So that's a nuclear wasteland we're talking about. And so the new academic year began in April 2012, which is 1 year later. The Education Board lifted a restriction that students can play in the schoolyards for less than 3 hours per day in the wake of the nuclear meltdowns last year. So these are heartless, unbelievably heartless people, this nuclear industry is. Just got another two more stories. Japan nuclear wastewater discharge plan provokes worldwide protest. This was the International Atomic Energy Agency's in 2023. The International Atomic Energy Agency's role is to analyze and confirm the data provided by TEPCO. That was backed up by a story last week we done, right? A recent story from a week ago. Not directly collect samples and verify them themselves. In other words, they're not a regulatory agency. And they're not. They don't have any authority. They don't have any sovereignty over any country. International Degenerate Agency says public trust is key to projects using radioactive soil. Right? This was Anna Clark from the International Atomic Degenerate Agency 2023 in about the soil. They were down picking up a $19 million check because Japan is the third biggest donor. The International Atomic Energy Agency is not a regulator and is not in a position to judge or approve it, even though they guarantee the water is going to be safe. Clark said, noting that the group's task is to make sure Japan's plan is in line with the Degenerate Agency, International UN, safety standards and disposal of radioactive waste. There is no safe disposal. A single atom in your body attacks it for the rest of your life, or a bird or a mammal or animal, and builds a tumor around it. See, I'm kettled in tonight, am I? Remember this picture from earlier in the year? They released this picture of the site. And so the red lines... Gee, I'm dry throat here. My apologies. The red line is meant to highlight the redacted places on that picture. Why did they redact all those places on those pictures? Right? It doesn't make any sense. Why would you redact all those pictures? And just let me zoom in on some of this stuff. So you can see like the gray lines and then the red on top of it. And it doesn't make any sense. Why is everything there redacted? Why did they do that? That was a major media. It's a very impressive picture, and we don't have any answer. Is there the steam coming out of the ground? We've been coming out of the ground at 10 sieverts per hour in 6 places. 3 sieverts is a lethal dose. Okay. 1st of October. Oh, this is October the 1st. That's right. I forgot about that. On March 11, 2011, Japan was struck by an earthquake, the largest earthquake in its history, and the 3rd largest earthquake in the history of the entire planet. Radioactive material leaked. This is not a leak. This is the ejected reactor core and the fuel pools. And the hateful, disgusting, parasitic nuclear industry, the lunatic nuclear industry, hello, everybody. So I think my poll is a little bit... Looks like someone picked up my video last night. We had 200 views in the first hour. And it got on 318 this morning and it stayed there all day and all night. Hasn't moved. I think I got 2 views today or something. Like 6 thumbs up with 2 views all day. They got no choice but to censor me. The truth will wreck them instantly. I'm busted up from trying to keep this whole operation moving. Radioactive material leaked. Do anybody think something got out of that building? Out of those 2 buildings, reactor 3 to your left and 4 behind me? Do you think anything managed to escape from this building? And 8/10 of the building is missing. It was 190 foot, 19-story, 65-meter building. Same thing with reactor 3. Less than 1/10 of the building is left. The reactor cores and the decades of reactor cores and the fuel pools were at the top of the building. I can't see the top of the buildings. But it's a leak, Dana. It's a radioactive material leak. $700 billion was spent by the Japanese government. But the Japanese government never spent they don't have $700 billion. That's the taxpayers. In restoration efforts, you can't restore after a nuclear meltdown. The communities, you can't restore the malls, the banks, the universities. You can't restore nothing. Everything needs to be taken to a repository that doesn't exist anywhere on the planet after 80 years. Because this industry is a hateful, disgusting, genocidal, omnicidal industry. Carbon emission reduction goals as global fuel shortage, this is why they're going nuclear, has prompted Japan to reverse its course on nuclear energy because of carbon emissions. Well, carbon is more birds, more trees, and more plants, more puppies, and more insects and whales, and not less. Radiation is killing all the birds and puppies and insects and whales. It's prompted the Japs to reverse its course on nuclear energy. No, it's just a hateful, disgusting industry that's controlling the universities and the media for a very long time. And we see that now symmetrically worldwide. If Japs had been able to move past the Fukushima disaster, given the need for nuclear energy in the current geopolitical climate, why hasn't Taiwan? And Taiwan is the only economy in Asia with a nuclear phase-out plan. So there's an agenda for the person who wrote this story, as you'll see coming up even worse. Unlike fossil fuel systems like a coal plant, nuclear power plant produces zero carbon dioxide emissions. So shut up. Zero air pollution, really. After Fukushima, the radioactive fallout was this is the French government spiked. The IRS and the actual French government had 1 million to 10 million atoms, or 10 million to 10 million atoms of cesium-137 per cubic meter of air. That's 8 days later, that model. Here's their 23-day model. You had 1 million to 10 million atoms covering the entire planet per cubic meter of air. And cesium-137, by the way, pulses energy 600 feet every second. The whole planet. And so you're talking about gamma shine on the ground worldwide, destroys the ability of insects and biota and the microscopic animals to reproduce and survive. And same thing like the spiders and all the little small creatures, the basis of the food chain. Zero air pollution. Such a dishonest thing to suggest that there's zero pollution. The fuel pools from every nuclear plant, 1,000 nuclear plants worldwide, hemorrhaging into the environment 24 hours a day are catastrophic. You don't need a nuclear meltdown. You don't need to dump nuclear in the oceans and everywhere else like they've done for decades. Hanford was 450 billion gallons in one go of nuclear sludge, splitting atoms, for goodness sakes, into the soil. 41 miles of unlined trenches. That's equal to an aquarium of nuclear waste, 6 feet wide, 518 feet tall, wrapped around the entire planet. But don't worry, because everything could fit into a swimming pool, right? They're nuke tart on this planet. Xenon in Washington was 450,000 times above detection levels, persisted for weeks. It's got a short half-life, persisted for weeks, meant you had an absurd release. It covered the whole planet. This is only 20 days covering the whole planet. And you can't have just the Xenon-133 plume, for goodness sakes. The 135 burns a hole through your lungs and ends up in your bones. There are valid questions, it turns into cesium actually. There are valid questions regarding where to store nuclear waste generated by reactors in Taiwan. Well, they have Orchard Island, which was the natives' community. They drove all the natives off Taiwan's big islands. And then the natives were settled on Orchard Island. And so Taiwan said, well, we need a nuclear dump. So let's go ask the natives on Orchard Island if we can build a canning factory for salmon and crabs and stuff like that. Instead, we'll build a nuclear dump. That's what they've done. And we'll give everybody on the island a little stipend every month, $1,000 or something. And so for about a decade and a half, the communities, the natives on Orchard Island thought Taiwan had a canning factory for salmon and crab meat and stuff like that. It was actually a nuclear dump, which is still packed over there. Taiwan is despicable. After Fukushima, Taiwan had over 2,200 students, university students from the nuclear industry, nuclear power plant employees, alumni from the nuclear industry, professors and everybody else were allowing their students, in fact, enforcing their students to get online and tell people in stories about Fukushima that it was like a banana and a potato chip and walking in the sunshine and climbing mountains. Like despicable, doesn't even come close to doing it justice what they done. Taipower connected with France, but implementing an arrangement with Taiwan before being derailed by the DBPP legislators. There would be an opportunity for the Taiwan-France reprocessing arrangements with sufficient political will. Like that's the coward thing to do, boys, is to reprocess it. Like the emissions from nuclear fuel pool are 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. That's why they're surrounded by farms. Because how else are they going to poison everybody else on the planet? After the referendum failed, the president announced that he would not rule out nuclear energy if technology became safer. He's under a lot of stress, right? Because there's a big industry there. Nuclear waste is reduced, and society's acceptance increases. So if they can manipulate everybody and deceive everybody, and reduce the waste by dumping it in your local landfills, because people don't know any better, and a few other small technicalities. And Lena McEachern is a recent graduate of Stanford University. So here's a university student. First thing, she got to come out and she got to sing the lies of, the lies sounds really, that whole story sounds very vaguely familiar of Rod Adams or Michael Schellenberg, for instance. The World Nuclear News, the World Nuclear Association, or the Nuclear Energy Institute propaganda versions. What a disgusting little parasite. What a revolting little parasite. She'll be working full-time in New York City, being a little scumbag, a little monster for the nuclear industry. A little traitors to humanity. A little brown-nosed and a little piece of shit. South Korea detects tritium near the Fukushima during TEPCO's discharge. Oh, well, that's nice. These are stories from today, right? This story is so important. It's probably the most important story on the entire planet. And we're struggling. There's nobody else really educating the population. It's retarded. The blob don't know. The blob don't care. Blah, 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 blah. South Korea, you say? South Korea, they closed 130 schools in South Korea because of radioactive fallout, and it wasn't from tritium. The nuclear industry is parasites. Levels below threshold for suspending discharge. That was from today's story. I'll show you this stupid picture. Why don't you show us what the buildings look like before you put the cap on top of them to hide the truth? Oh, nothing got out on the tritium, didn't it? Yeah. You should be drowned in a bucket of tritium. Highly radioactive glass rained on Tokyo. Fukushima nuclear fuel rained on Tokyo. No, but nothing got out on the tritium, didn't it? Every peck of water on this entire planet is tritiated because of 80 years of emissions from 1,000 fuel pools and a pulse event from Fukushima, amongst many other events and all the dumping in the ocean. Stupid. It's stupid. And he done it on purpose. It was on purpose. That's why they're building Chern, right? That's why they built Chern. That's on purpose, too. It's meant to destroy the planet. So the radioactive fallout on Tokyo, what they call radioactive glass, 500 trillion atoms a kilogram. These are insane numbers. These are insane. Tokyo, 36 million people, metropolitan Tokyo, should be abandoned. Yeah, no repeat of last night, I see. The South Korean government announced that on the first, which is today, that tritium, a radioactive element detected in the ocean near Fukushima, release of the treated radioactive water. So what they're saying is nothing got out of the reactors. Right? That's what they're saying. That's the takeaway from that story. Nothing got out. Nothing got out of these buildings. Oh, okay. During the 15 discharge, like they never stopped releasing radiation from the ocean into the ocean. It's never stopped. TEPCO collected, and TEPCO, which is a administration, not a decommission authority, analyzed samples from 10 points within 3 kilometers and 4 points within 10 kilometers. And as a result of tritium, really, Fukushima, let's go back to 2013. Fukushima disaster contaminated the territory of Japan, the Sea of Japan, South Korea, North Korea, and by proxy Russia and China, up to 8 orders of magnitude above the global fallout background off the prefecture's coast. Does that sound like tritium to anybody? The International Degenerate Agency, scumbag of the world, UN, confirmed, though, on site inspections at TEPCO that there was no abnormalities in the discharge. So there's no abnormalities in that, is it? You're talking about 36 reactor cores were lost, for goodness sakes. No, nothing got out, like a banana. Oh, it's like a banana. Have you told a banana lately that you love them? Man arrested after entering the Fukushima Exclusion Zone. That story's got a lot of traction. Now, he was live streaming. We talked about that. Live streaming from the nuclear wasteland. It's not too bright going into the nuclear wasteland in the first place. A year after going into Chernobyl. The big question was, did they have Geiger counters, and were the Geiger counters scary? Like, it's highly unlikely they had good Geiger counters, like real proper ones. But even a shit one in a nuclear wasteland is going to be singing. A Ukrainian YouTuber with over 6 million subscribers. That's why they arrested him, because you can get 6 million people educated in just a single live stream. Theoretically, right? It can go viral, and it did. They probably made it worse by arresting him. Breaking into a house. I mean, like all the wild hogs are doing down there. Like all the looters have already done. 1 year after he entered Chernobyl. It's how can anybody have any compassion for the nuclear industry for a split second after what they've done to you and destroyed the future of humanity and the species now? His vision to broadcast from a nuclear disaster exclusion zone, nuclear wasteland, was a step too far. Step too far for the idiot machines. Authorities, there's 300 police officers have died. I think that was like 2017. By 2017, 300 police that were guarding these ghost towns had died from kidney failure. It is strictly forbidden to enter the zone. Well, why do we see all the other scumbags, the pro-nuclear community, allowed to go in there, I wonder? with punishments ranging from 30 days detention and fines. Like, if that's the only punishment besides heart problems, liver problems, lung problems, respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline problems from going into a nuclear wasteland, you're not going to get off scot-free. Your hair, you don't shave your hair and your eyebrows and throw all your clothes away. You're going to poison everything in your washing machines and then all your other laundry and your towels and dish towels and everything else. They already got punished enough. They were into the nuclear wasteland. They can never get that out of their lungs again. So, like, nothing got out of reactor 3, nothing got out of reactor 4. That's pretty interesting. How does that work? How can nothing get out of these buildings? In the future, there's going to be T-shirts from all kinds of people worldwide of spit on a nuclear scientist and win a case of pop. And your paper suits and Tyvek suits are not going to protect you. TEPCO said he burned 7,000 of them a day. So they liberate all that radiation back into the environment because you can't destroy it. While streaming it live on ShitTube, they even camped out in an abandoned nuclear wasteland home located in Okuma, which is joined onto the nuclear plant site. So they can see the nuclear plant. I think that was the problem, right? That's why Miles O'Brien with PBS they chopped his arm off because he hid away a couple of memory cards and didn't give it to him, right? So he just chopped his friggin' arm off. And then he gave up the memory card at that point. And then they stuck him on a plane, sent him down to Thailand. And a week later then, because he disappeared for a week, and he showed up in Thailand as the one-armed bandit. The dirtbag. They even camped out in an abandoned home. They're all abandoned. It's a nuclear wasteland, for goodness sakes. Following the latest foray into an exclusion zone / nuclear wasteland, saw him and his group arrested on Friday after the public tipped off the authority, after the pro-nuclear rap machine tipped them off, after the pro-nuclear degenerate machine tipped the police off. Police officers discovered the suspects following information provided by a pro-nuclear degenerate and arrested them in the act. The blob don't know, the da. Uranium market surges. No, it doesn't. As nuclear power ignites a new energy era. No, it doesn't. And it's not even a real name, Market Minute by Market Minute. As of late 2025, September, spot uranium prices climbed significantly, near $82 per pound. Well, Sprout Physical Trust, Uranium Trust, 3 years ago showed up and bought up all the physical uranium here in Canada, which is one of the biggest producers of high-grade uranium. And then they didn't sell it. They didn't take possession of it. They bought it. And so that created an artificial demand for raw uranium, from the mine. And then the industry and the media all went out there and went nuts trying to promote nuclear, and people started buying stocks. And of course, they had some investors were buying the stocks to artificially inflate them. It's called a Ponzi scheme everywhere else. So now, after 3 years, it's up to $82 per pound. But this was all done as a Ponzi scheme, the whole bloody thing. There is no nuclear renaissance. You have the same gigawatts now as you had in the 90s. There is no nuclear renaissance. It was a total construct as a Ponzi scheme. And so for the last, since Conference of Parties 28, United Nations, the perpetually evil United Nations, climate chummy, 14 of the biggest financial institutions on the planet had decided they were going to help nuclear, small modular reactors in particular. And we didn't quite understand how this was going to play out. So what they'd been doing is buying shares for 2 or 3 or 4 weeks by the millions in small modular reactor companies. And so you'll see their stocks will rise up, but that's the artificial inflation. And so then the stock market brokers will pump for uranium stocks to the investors. Oh, look at this, it's climbing right up. And so they'll talk them into spending their hard-earned money, actual worked-for money. And then 2 weeks later, when you got enough people there to raise the stocks high enough, the banks will sell theirs and steal the money, the profits of the investors. And they've been doing that nonstop. And that's how they're keeping the small modular reactor companies afloat. It's a very lucrative thing for a bunch of the players, right? But you're robbing millions of nice people, really solid people, good people, people who worked all their life to earn their money in factories and everywhere else. And they're just stealing that every 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks. And then rinse and repeat that cycle. That's what they're doing. It's called a Ponzi scheme. And it's so evil. Of course, it's nuclear industry. What do you expect, see? A global atomic awakening. There's no global atomic awakening. So they have to put out these stories because they just done the 50th nuclear conference of promoting nuclear, and so they need to put out this kind of press releases. This is part of that routine, right? The pressing need to combat climate change, which is created by 80 years of emission from the nuclear industry. Right? That's what climate change is, 80 years of emission from the nuclear industry. Just give me 1 second. That's okay. I think we got it. At least I thought I did. The pressing need to combat, climate change is 80 years of emissions from the nuclear industry, pulsing energy at the speed of light every second. Snowstorms of it every day from 1,000 fuel pools covering the entire planet. Pulsing energy for millions. Like carbon doesn't pulse energy at all, and at almost at the speed of light at all. Carbon's just neutral, right? Wherever it goes, you got more trees, more plants, more insects. The industry wasn't counting on anybody debating them, is the reason they say the things they do. For instance, NuScale Power, small modular reactor design, received a U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission's approval. Yeah, but it's an incomplete application for the design. Instead of 1 million pieces of paper, it's like 700,000 pieces of paper. Instead of 2 million pieces of paper, rather, for the application and the design. They have an incomplete, but they were told to rubber stamp it to try to boost the small modular reactor industry, which is blatantly telling you there is no small modular reactor. And Ontario Power Generation is moving forward with the boiling water reactor X 300 small modular reactor. This is 12 stories below ground and 11 stories above the ground. It's a 240-foot building. It's bigger than Fukushima reactors, which are massive. And they're calling that a small modular reactor. Right? It's got nothing to do with a small modular reactor. It's the same design as a large reactor. They just call it a small modular reactor. Oh, we're going to go ahead and build one. Well, where's your application? Where's your did it get the stamp for a small modular reactor? And then when you finally look at it, it's a 230-foot, 240-foot building. Half of it will be underground, but it's still a skyscraper. Still a 24-story building. It's not something you're going to put in the back of a transport truck and take somewhere. Uranium spot prices have climbed for approximately $63 per pound at the start of 2025 to $82 per pound by late September. And this is a pump and dump. That'll go back down to $63 in a week or two. It'll climb back up to $80 a week or two after that. Right, they're stealing people's investments. The 14 biggest financial institutions on the planet are working in that Ponzi scheme, right, condoned by UN's Conference of Parties 28. This upward trend has fueled significant gains in uranium mining stocks. Well, there's more to nuclear than mining stocks. Right, so when Sprout Physical Uranium Trust bought the physical uranium for like $32 a pound and hung on to it, then he raised more money and bought another couple of 100,000 pounds, and this created an artificial demand for uranium, raw uranium, and they're still doing that scam over and over now. It's disgusting. And their planet now is destroyed from radioactive fallout. And Fukushima was a pulse event and contaminated and destroyed the lifeblood of our planet and the ability of the planet to sustain life and produce life. You got almost every species of whale out there is emaciated. What do you think that really means? And a lot of those big species, like the gray whales, like they were emaciated last year. They're on their northern migratory run for 12,000 miles. Now they're headed south. They're not going to make it back north again to Baja, California, New Mexico. The unfolding nuclear power renaissance. There is no unfolding nuclear power renaissance. It's a Ponzi scheme. The clear winners are the uranium mining companies. So that's not a nuclear. If the uranium mining companies are making a few bucks, they don't make jack shit money. They're just miners. They're nothing. France opened a flurry of nuclear power plants in the 80s and 90s, giving it a low-carbon electricity ever since. They got their hands on cheap uranium by causing a civil war in Niger for about 60 years now. They destroyed the country and millions of people's lives and the governments and everything else. They destroyed everything so they could take over the country. And that's what they done. And because the Civil War destroyed millions of homes so they can have cheap uranium. It's not and there's nothing low carbon about electricity. There's no low carbon electricity from nuclear. Nuclear is the most resource intensive industry in human history. The French nuclear test exposed the entire Polynesian population to radiation. Poisoned the entire population. It was equal to a Nagasaki bomb a day for 12 years or something from the French nuclear tests from the megatons when you spread it out, when you divided it out. Human sex ratio at birth and residential proximity to nuclear facilities in France. So this study was done around the nuclear facilities because they knew they were going to see a discrepancy of males and females, which is a marker that the entire population was poisoned by radiation. There was an anti-neutrino experiment done here in Canada and the granite shield, right? Where granite is, miles and miles deep of granite. And what they have a deep mine 150 miles away in granite. It was a kilometer and a half or something underground, and they can detect the neutrino, the anti-neutrinos, from a nuclear power plant 150 miles away through a mile and a half or a kilometer and a half of granite. So imagine living in a city where you're getting bombarded by these anti-neutrinos and everything else, which are destroying chromosomes and cells and DNAs. That's just one of the little facets that are really important to the big equation. So the idea of the human sex ratio, which they done it to Europe after Chernobyl because they knew Europe was contaminated with brutal radioactive fallout from Chernobyl. They closed 9,400 farms in Ireland, Scotland, United Kingdom, on the other side of Europe, 3,000 kilometers away from Chernobyl, for goodness sakes. So more males than females, which means less reproduction. So that's true for all the species. If it's true for humans, it's catastrophic for the species. Ontario nuclear plant was granted a record 20-year extension. A record 20-year extension. Darlington Nuclear has been granted a 20-year extension from the Canadian Nuclear Non-Safety Commission. The longest term ever granted to a disease factory here in Canada. Darlington. So Darlington legally is allowed to release 5 million trillion atoms of tritium-3H in the year, just by ear legally each year. And then the Canadian reactors, the Point La Prairie, which is in New Brunswick on the Atlantic Ocean, legally releases 16,400,000 trillion atoms of liquid and vapor airborne radioactive fallout of tritium-3H each year. The Canadian reactors, look at what the UK Sizewell is 8 trillion. Look at the Canadians. The CANDU reactor, the idea of those reactors was to produce tritium for the nuclear weapons for America and their allies. And they still hide it away and deny it here in Canada. We produce so much that we have lots left over, and that gets turned into the glow-in-the-dark exit sign, emergency signs, with a 120-year half-life. And then anybody can go buy that and poison somebody if they want to, but anybody can go buy it. If you buy that and dump it into your drinking water source, you'll poison everybody in your community forever. And they take it and then throw it in the garbage when they're finished with it, where it breaks open, of course, and that tritium is released into the environment. And this is how they're getting rid of the excess. Like, they create so much, it's hard to wrap your mind around how evil the nuclear industry is, because the evil never stops. We try to cover it 5 days a week, which is typically, it's a very difficult thing, right? Because it's, there's no good stories, see? There's no redeeming qualities to the nuclear industry. So it's a tough gig to get people to get educated. We run an educational program, and we don't bow to anybody. We don't bow to any universities, any industries. We fight for this planet. I don't know what's going on here. Oh, that's what's going on. Hang on. Bear with me. I'm stupid some days. Okay, most days. They got 11 likes and 22 people in the show. Got 11 votes and 22 people. How does that work, I wonder? Has 80 years of radioactive fallout from 1,000 fuel pools destroyed the Earth's ability to produce and sustain life? The nuclear reactor fuel pool is full of decades of reactor cores. They're still splitting atoms for millions of homes and businesses, but there's no containment. And that's why every nuclear power plant, except for a couple, is surrounded by farms. In order to spell evil, it's Nuclear. That's how you spell evil. Evil is unbelievably real. We have been hoodwinked our entire lives about reality. The Canadian Non-Nuclear Safety Commission regulates the use of disease factories and materials to protect health and safety, really. The nuclear industry protects health and safety. Just shut up, you lying pig sacks of shit. And the environment. This is ludicrous to suggest the nuclear industry is the Achilles heel to the species and the environment. Ah, yes, the International Degenerate Agency. Just let me just deep six all the stuff we already covered, because otherwise if I click the wrong thing, I'll never find my way back. Let me explain it this way to you. We have spent 6 years going from Vancouver, British Columbia to Alaska. And 6 years. The species, and I've hit this every direction. You can't even conceive of how many directions I do the research on. And I'm out there for years and years and years, 4 to 5 months at a time on the ocean by myself. The species to your left are exterminated. Would you rather have the species to the left or nuclear small modular reactors that'll poison everybody for 1 billion years? The emissions from the small modular reactors, which are going to be running on plutonium mixed oxide fuel, it'll be 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. The current emission from any nuclear power plant fuel pool is 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. Why would you want that on your planet? So the species to your left are exterminated. We know that because we went back for 6 years to see if the species to your left recovered. The species to the left didn't recover. It got worse each year. It's stripped. There's just a couple of algae. 700 algae are gone. The 480 species of sea worms are gone. The 78 species of starfish are gone. And they all came in multiple vibrant colors. The 76 species of the sea anemones, they all come in multiple vibrant colors, are all gone. The clams, the little necks, the manillas, the razorback, the gooey ducks, the abalones, the oysters, the scallops, all the shellfish are gone. And all the beaches up there are made of that, breaking down over millenniums. So how could you have beaches made of shells breaking down over millions of years, but no shellfish on the beach? Oh, just nuclear. And I used to be a commercial diver, and so I know the coast really well. And I go out there for 4 to 5 months each year, and the species are gone. Does anybody give a shit? How can people not care? How can you not care that they were wiped out by Fukushima radioactive fallout? How can you in good faith pretend that never happened? I can't. I still have nightmares. I can never forget those 6 years of research expeditions, hoping and praying you would find an oasis for the first year, but at the end of it, you're stuck with the indelible fact that we have exterminated it, and that's the food chain, that's the nursery of the Pacific Ocean on top of that. In the 700 algae were 5,500 vertebrates without the backbones. The migratory birds were depending upon all those species to supplement their diet on the migratory runs. Now they're showing up emaciated, or they're just not showing up at all. Here on the East Coast, they never even showed up for the last 5 years. It's called an extinction event. Pretending it's not, you're in for you can't deny it in another year or two when most of the whales will be gone. All the seabirds are almost gone. The ones that are left are in pretty rough shape. They're not likely to last more than another 2 years, 3 years. International degenerate agencies working to restore power lines at the Zaporizhzhya nuclear disease factory. Come on, please. After Zelenskyy, cokehead, sounds the alarm. Yesterday he announced he's spending $90 billion on weapons. It's a proxy war with NATO, which is 30 countries, 30 militaries. If you look up NATO, it says 30 militaries. Because of Russia's shelling, the plant has been cut off from power. Well, it's not running. They shut the reactors down a long time ago. And it's being supplied with electricity by diesel generators. They can keep that up indefinitely. Russia's got control of the plant. They're not going to let it melt down. This is just fear-mongering and try to chase Russia out of there. That's all this is. The international shit-for-brain industry has played a role in safeguarding the conditions. They don't jack fucking shit of the Ukrainian nuclear power plants. Inspectors from the agency are on. These are not inspectors. These are sadistic demons. These are catastrophic monsters. Zelenskyy and the United Nations Atomic Energy Head warns of a heightened risk. Of course, there is no risk. They got 16 fucking generators there. They have no running reactors there. They don't need 4,500 tons of water a fucking minute or something. It's just pure fear-mongering. White House restores board overseeing claims for sick nuclear workers. The RICO Act, or what was it called? I can't even remember. Not the RICO, but there was close to it. The White House on Tuesday announced it restored an advisory board, plays a key role in improving medical claims by nuclear weapons workers. Forget about all the communities that were destroyed from radioactive fallout. They gave them like $5 or something. Who have had high, I'm not kidding you, right? That the next day after the test when the radiation told everybody, you got to stay indoors, plumes coming through. So then they gave them $5 for everybody in each house for their inconvenience. And of course, all these people got brutal illnesses and diseases, and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries and illnesses. After it was suspended by the Department of Degenerate and Non-Human Services in January. Eligible workers at the degenerate U.S. Department of Energy and Defense nuclear sites are entitled to $150,000 lump sums. And they were saying that, they need the money so they can get chemotherapy. I was like, do you got any idea how disconnected you've got to be to say something like that? If I get my hands on chemotherapy and put it in my dog, I'll be charged with dog abuse. If they take it and put it in your loved ones and kill them, you call them heroes because you're fucking stupid. And medical, I don't mean it in a bad way. I mean because the nuclear industry made you incompetent and incapable of making informed decisions. It's evil to take people into a hospital and stick radiation into them. That's evil. If I take radiation, spread it over your community, it's called terrorism. If they take it, stick it in your body, they're called doctors. Get fucking real, boy. If they can demonstrate through petitions that the cancers are diagnosed, like Hanford, a couple of years back, there was a story about Hanford. You didn't have to prove you got sick from Hanford. You just got to prove you're sick. And you only had to prove you worked at Hanford for 8 hours, a lousy 8-hour shift, anywhere from the 50s on. If you can prove that and you got really bad sickness, you're entitled to benefits, health care, and a lump sum payment. Of course, the nuclear industry took them all the way to the Supreme Court where they lost. Demonstrate through petitions the cancers they are diagnosed with. Well, it's not just cancer. There's heart problem, liver problem, lung problem, respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline, Alzheimer's, dementia, autism, diabetes, Down syndrome, schizophrenia. Your immune system is compromised. You're more susceptible to pathogens and viruses that were normally harmless and innocuous and benign. I freaking love that song, eh? He's got so many of those songs over the James Lewis's site on YouTube. It's unbelievable. If you can prove, how are you going to prove it that you worked there in the 50s? How does that fucking work? To continue work until at least September 2027, the Radiation and Worker Health Board was set to expire on Tuesday. Over 700,000 people have been employed in the stupid nuclear industry since the Cold War, not counting all the transient people they use for the dangerous stuff, the millions and millions of transient workers they disposed of like paper towels, at 380 sites, Superfund sites across the country. A community, I can't pronounce that name, and so instead of, you can't see something, you can't pronounce it, that's all you can do. There it is. This is, I think it's a native community in Ontario, if I remember correctly. And the activist protest nuclear summit push for renewable energy, nuclear summit. Wave and title, well, like geothermal, see? Like, if that said geothermal, there's zero possibility they would post that picture. And climate activists, if you're a climate activist, you gotta, like, nuclear is your enemy. Outside the Marriott Hotel downtown Syracuse on Tuesday, this is the United States, I guess, protest against Governor Katie Nuclear Energy Summit. Oh, they got so much money for the nuclear industry, for summits and big symposiums and conference of parties and everything else. It's absurd. If they took the money and put half of that into geothermal, they would solve all their energy problems in 1 year. The governor suggested several nuclear projects in recent months, including a proposed small modular reactor. Like, why are you proposing a small modular reactor when they don't even exist? How can you propose that? Let's propose that we have a fucking party on Mars next weekend. And billions to be given to old nuclear reactors still operating on tribal land near Lake Ontario. Like the old nuclear reactors, the reason that they had like a 30 to 40 year, typically it was a 30-year. And the reason was because of the gamma shines, the neutron bombardment, the beta rays, the alpha shines, would destroy the integrity of all the infrastructure on the site. And so the high-pressure reactors at 1,000 to 2,000 pounds per square inch, the containment of that was brittle, where if you hit it at one point, once it gets brittle, if you hit it with a 3-pound maul, you could crack it. And if you put a crack into something at 1,000, 2,000 pounds per square inch, well, you know what a tire looks like when it blows up at 100 pounds per square inch. Imagine, well, look at Fukushima. The nuclear project would cause money to be taken away from wind, solar, storage, and efficiency projects. Actually, they already done that in 2022. Ontario canceled 758 renewable energy projects, wind farms and solar farms. And then there was $5 billion for storage. And they gave that to Bruce Nuclear Power, which was building storage for a nuclear plant of all things. So if you took the $5 billion and gave it to the 758 wind and solar farms, you wouldn't be building reactors and even looking at these fake small modular reactors right now, because you would have solved your energy issues, see? So they canceled 758 solar and wind farms in Ontario, Canada, 2022. And then the money for storage for proof of concept was given to the nuclear power industry to do whatever they felt like doing with it. LR joins forces with Texas firm to explore use of micro-nuclear reactors in powering ships. What are you going to put a bunch of Chernobyls out there on the ocean for? The so-called micro-nuclear reactor technology doesn't exist. There's no license, no applications for licenses in any of the regulatory agencies worldwide. What they used to do hundreds of years ago was put big sails on them. And you know what? That's what they should do now, to go across the ocean and then start up the engines when you're ready to go into a port and turn it off when you get there to help reduce emissions. Nothing so stupid like nuclear. Using low enriched uranium fuel compared to high grade, it's still nasty plutonium mixed oxide fuel, basically. And the hateful of the hateful, the World Nuclear News, the degenerates of degenerates. Key takeaway from the World Nuclear Symposium 50, the 50-year anniversary, I guess. And look, you got Sammy. What a skink that creature actually is. Marked a historical milestone, the 50th edition of the flagship gathering of the global nuclear industry, held in perpetually evil London, which is now controlled by the invaders, by the Muslims and everybody else. All of them military age and single. So if they have an actual civil war or something down there, guess who they're going to recruit to beat down the United Kingdom? You're not even allowed to fly a flag down there now. It's totally lost, right? The event brought together leaders. That was the plan once Elizabeth died, right? Then shit for brains Charles would be put on a pedestal as the last reigning, but is no longer a sovereign country now. The event, same as France, right? And Canada, the same thing. United States. The event brought together leaders. They brought in so many invaders in just 4 years. The event brought together leaders from government, industry, finance, technology under the theme Energizing the Future Now. World Nuclear Association Director General Sama, the evil of evil women. She's such an evil creature, eh? She's filthy rich, don't look at her. All decked out in jewelry and a $6,000 bonjour dress on. Nothing but the best for Sama. Over 3 days, 1,122 registered, that's very important, by the way, delegates from 59 countries, 1,122 nuclear bootlickers from 59 countries, explored the evolving road of nuclear energy with a clear message. Global momentum is with nuclear, but it's not. You got the same gigawatts now as you had in the early 90s. There is no momentum. There's no nuclear renaissance. It's the opposite. It was 660 gigawatts of solar last year. Nuclear was like 3 gigawatts. How can you call that a nuclear renaissance? Like, it's all hype. And it never comes to fruition because it's so fake, right? Deliver what the world demands. The world doesn't demand nuclear, you moron. The symposium's commemorative reflections trace this journey from the first meeting in 1976, hosted by the Shithead Institute, to today's expansive forum led by the degenerate World Nuclear Association. They're pigs, eh? They don't even put their names on the story. They don't even have the integrity to put, neither does World Nuclear News or the rest of them. Anybody in the nuclear industry, there's just a few out there, right? The hanger-oners, right? There's a couple of them. I'm not going to mention their names because I don't want to give them any prominence. And avoiding 2.1 billion tons of carbon dioxide emission of coal. A nuclear power plant, each of them, needs 4,500 tons of water a minute. Nuclear power plants cannot run on their own. They run on coal, they run on gas, they run on oil. And so every nuclear power plant in a 24-hour period, every reactor in a 24-hour period needs 6,450,000 one-ton pickup trucks equivalent, with 1,000 liters, 2,200 pounds in each truck, of water. In 24 hours, needs 4,500 one-ton pickup trucks every minute of water. That's, in 24 hours, is equal to a row of one-ton pickup trucks with 1,000 liters in the back of it wrapped around the entire planet in 24 hours of water. How much energy have you got to use to pull that, just that one facet off? We're just talking about water coming in, right? It needs 2 gas, oil, and coal plants dedicated every day. But without gas, oil, and coal, a nuclear plant can't exist. On top of that, and they're the most resource-intensive industry in human history for every facet of it. So to suggest for even a millisecond that they avoided 2.1 billion tons of anything is ludicrous when they're the most resource-intensive industry in human history. After Fukushima, the West Coast was was assassinated with 220 million atoms of iodine-129. But that's enough to stuff the thyroid glands of every bird, mammal, animal, creature, biota on the entire planet. Every species, and humans included. So every species producing radioactive hormones just through that venue on its own. You can't just have iodine-129. Iodine-131, for every iodine-131, and we're talking about particles, which is probably splitting atoms, by the way. For every iodine-131, there's 10 times more iodine-132, 30 times more iodine-133, 31 times more iodine-129, which I just showed you. And this was a Canadian study. The 220 million atoms of the iodine-129, by the way, is a Ottawa study in Canada. This was the West Coast. Iodine-131, you can't call an element iodine-131 unless it pulses energy at the speed of light every second. And the university that took over that study that the students originally discovered claimed there was only 10 counts per minute from these samples. It doesn't work that way. If you got 20 million particles of radioactive iodine-131, you got 20 million pulses of energy almost at the speed of light each second of iodine-131. And then that same sample is 10 times more iodine-132, 30 times more iodine-133. The iodine-132 and 133, by the way, is 9 times more effective at ionizing and radiating the thyroid gland than the incredibly, unbelievably effective iodine-131 is. The xenon-133 on the west coast per square meter underground, this is radioactive fallout, density underground, these are incredible numbers, at 1 million atoms per square meter. These are absurd numbers. There was also 1,500 atoms of radioactive sulfur per cubic meter of air in California. This is the sulfur peroxide hydrogen buckyballs from spraying seawater. And they knew about this in the 60s. When you heat up seawater, you liberate the sulfur. At high enough temperatures, it turns into the spherical balls that will ingest uranium, plutonium, americium, neptunium. By the way, the biggest byproduct of the radioactive fuel rod is the curium isotopes, not cesium, not iodines. And then there's the plutonium, the neptunium-239, plume covering the planet in just 20 days, decays to plutonium in 2.5 days, 50% each time. So the neptunium, you can't get a plume covering the planet neptunium because it decays to plutonium. So you're looking at a plutonium plume covering the whole planet. So you got xenon, you got 220 million atoms of a Canadian study of Ottawa per liter. You got 131, you got the 132, of course, in ratios of 10, 132 in the ratio of 30, the 131 in the ratio of 31, or 129 rather, 131. So you got one isotope, you got 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's 7 different isotopes, all of with the exact same attribute. Look, they cover the whole planet. And so you're talking about every species producing radioactive hormones and radioactive stem cells, minimum, every human, every species, and all the developing species can't withstand that kind of an assault. Right? That's described in academic journals as an assault. Back to that story. Banks, investors, and multilateral institutions were here in greater numbers than ever before, including the likes of the World Banks, the UBS, the Dutch Bank, JP Morgan, HSBC. At the Finance Summit, they spoke of unprecedented appetite for nuclear from investors. An unprecedented appetite? Well, if that was true, they wouldn't be out there begging for money all over the world for their nuclear plants, now would it? So this is just meant to trick people into investing in a hateful, sadistic, a nihilistic, omnicide industry. We cannot rapidly expand nuclear capacity without investing in the resilience of the fuel cycle, supply chain, and workforce. Oh, really? Which, because you wouldn't say that unless that was missing. That's the only reason they're saying stuff like that. They're despicable. It's a despicable industry. Nuclear capacity is projected to double to 746 gigawatts by 2040. Like, what the hell are you talking about? There is zero possibility that you're going to double that by 2040. It's zilch. Which means you got to build something like 25 reactors a year. Large ones. It's not happening. It's not going to happen. They don't have any small modular reactors. They're just looting everybody before the bottom falls out, because geothermal is right around the corner. New mines, anything small modular reactor could even freaking hope to do, geothermal can do it next year. All you do is start building it, and next year you'll be way ahead. New mines must be developed to bring this material into supply. Conversion enrichment services face regional constraints shaped by geopolitics, and fuel fabrication capacities must expand, not only to meet the growing demand, but to support new reactor types. They're talking about the plutonium mixed oxide high assay fuel. A recurring theme across the symposium was the need for deeper, broader partnerships to turn ambition into reality. In other words, they haven't got a friggin' hope in hell. But they'll scuttle every renewable project on the planet, like they done in Ontario with 758 wind and solar farms. They killed that in 2022 because they wanted to promote nuclear. It's a hateful, it's an extinction machine. Delivery just from the radioactive fallout. You don't need nuclear wars. You don't need nuclear action. You don't need nuclear dumps. And believe me, you had your share of that. You just need nuclear fuel pools splitting atoms into your environment 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And you will exterminate the planet eventually. It's a slow kill. It's a guaranteed one. But now it's accelerating because Fukushima was a pulse event. It'll depend on governments, industry, financiers, and energy users working together. In other words, it's a fucking pipe dream. It's a pathetic pipe dream. World Nuclear Symposium 50 was not just a celebration of history. It was a turning point. No, it wasn't. Just another bullshit symposium like every other year we covered it. The last 50 years proved the essential value of nuclear. No, it didn't. The next 25 will decide its impact. The conversation in London made one thing clear. Nuclear is and will always be a degenerate sack of fucking shit. The pro-nuclear community are just the coward community. It's a community of chicken necks and inbreeds and cowards. The United States selects 4 companies for advanced nuclear fuel pilot program. So they're so far away from coming to fruition, it's not funny. Uranium Insight, U.S. nuclear ambition greenlights the industry revival. Right, this is all just artificially inflating hype when you don't have the technology there, you don't have the infrastructure there, you don't have the material, you don't have the supply chain, you don't have the welders to build anything. And it takes like 4 years to get the welders up to speed. So even if you look, we've gave the nuclear industry everything they ever wanted. They gave them all the prominence, all the media, they gave them all the universities, and they still can't we gave them absurd, sickening amount of monetary money, and they still can't make anything happen. Like the reactor they're building in Great Britain is up to around $50 billion now. And it's full of rats. Rats have chewed all the wires that are already buried in cement pipes and everything else. They can't get to it. It's never going to turn on. Recent policy action, we're talking about millions of rats. Rats love insulation. They love wiring harnesses and cases. And if rats are chewing in it, we've seen a single rat take out a whole bunch of facilities many times. Imagine what 1 million does. Recent policy actions aiming to quadruple U.S. nuclear power capacity by 2050, that's ridiculous to suggest that they can do it, may represent the most consequential nuclear legislation of our time. Again, it's just the endless false promises from the nuclear industry. It meant to rob your countries and your communities. I'm a bit dizzy and I'd apologize. I'm whacked. Tough, long day, good day, but a long, hard day. And popular opinions align in favor of nuclear. No, never, not even for a second. The nuclear industry is out there promoting themselves, and there is no nuclear industry. Uranium Insight, U.S. nuclear ambition greenlights the industry revival. So what? They say they don't know much about radiation, but they know everything about radiation. Like they know so much about radiation. They have millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of studies on low-dose radiation, and it has no redeeming qualities whatsoever. This is not an illusion, this is a fact. This study here, the proportions of childhood leukemia incidence in Great Britain may be caused by natural background ionizing radiation. If that was true, which is not, of course, because natural background, you don't bioaccumulate it like you do with man-made. And Iran's got a lot more than Britain does of natural stuff, and you don't see any cancers there either. And these cancers, by the way, were right alongside the reprocessing facility in Sellafield. It used to be called Windscale after the nuclear meltdown of the plutonium mixed oxide breeder reactor, which is still hemorrhaging 8 million liters a day into the Atlantic Ocean. You had all these children right a few miles away in this community, these cancer clusters. They tried to blame it on the common flu. They tried to blame it on natural background, anything but the nuclear industry. And that place is surrounded by farms. Let me show you that. See, under no circumstances will they typically acknowledge that radiation has any bad attributes. This is a satellite picture of Sellafield. What do you notice about that picture? It makes it stand out. It's surrounded by farms, right? If you do a satellite picture of any nuclear plant, particularly nuclear processing facilities, for instance, this is what you're going to see. Like if you look at La Hague in France, etc., this is what you're going to see. They can't contain the emissions. So the place is surrounded by farms to move the radiation into the communities and poison people. That's what it's all about. Every child from Sellafield or in the United Kingdom has plutonium in their teeth. They know that because the baby's teeth were collected voluntarily. Parents sent in the baby's teeth, and every child's tooth was full of plutonium. The proportion of childhood leukemia. The cause of childhood leukemia remains generally unknown, although exposure to moderate high levels of ionizing radiation, like the atomic bombing of Japan or from radiotherapy, is an established cause. Like calling radiation therapy, you should go to jail for the rest of your life for doing that. There is no radiation therapy. It's radiation genocide. Let me explain that to you. No rest for the wicked, I guess. There we go. Yeah. I'm not going to go through a bunch tonight, but I just want to give you a little peek at radiation therapy. Yeah, you can take your loved ones in for radiation therapy because the doctor says there's nothing they can do. They got cancer. Of course, they got it from radiation in the first place, from radioactive fallout, or eating food from around all the nuclear power plants. Introduction to radiation injury. That's a polite way to put it. Another silent epidemic. Radiation-induced injury to your eyeballs. Sounds like a peachy, eh? Radiation injury to the heart. Remember, all of this is radiation therapy. Cardiac injuries from radiation therapy. Radiation-induced kidney injuries. Hypoxia from radiation, of course. Blood spinal cord barrier disruption from radiation therapy. These are all radiation therapy injuries. So you go in and get radiation therapy, and you end up with 6 other cancers. You might cure that cancer because you killed every cell in that part of your body, but now you got cancer everywhere in your body. Central nervous system, your cranial nerves, your lungs, your head and your neck. Like radiation therapy is called a genocide if you're an honest person. It's called murder if you're realistic. There is no such thing as radiation therapy. That's the only way they can quantify murdering you. The people at the hospital, they become desensitized pretty quickly. Radiation-induced brain necrosis. There's so many of those studies you can barely wrap your mind around how they can even consider using this stuff. Rectal injuries from radiation therapy. Radiation therapy is the equivalent of murder. It's murder. If you took their children and stuck this same stuff into them, they'll try to get you in jail for the rest of your life. It's not illegal to poison you with radiation. Congress and parliaments don't have the authority to make it illegal to poison you with radiation. They have the authority to make it illegal to poison you with 3,000 chemicals, and they do, but they can't make it illegal to poison you with man-made radiation because only a sweet deal they got, only the Nuclear Regulatory Commission is allowed to designate it as a poison. And they're not doing that. That's suicide for their job. They didn't get the job because they're good people. They got the job because they're sadistic monsters. Radiation-induced brain injuries after radiation therapy. Radiation therapy is murder. It's murder by radiation. And it's legal murder. It's not illegal to poison you with radiation. That's how you get away with it. They'll call it radiation therapy. They must have done some yucking and laughing up over that one when they first came up with that idea. Well, I mean, they've done it with radium. Radium suppositories, radium lipstick, radium makeup, radium hand wash, radium soap, radium mouthwash, radium. This is sadistic industries. The legacy of the nuclear industry is sadistic. Radium, one of the most sadistic ones was the radium spray. It's good for everything. It's got 1,000 friggin' uses. Clean your car, clean your furniture, clean your antiques, disinfect your house, your counter, your dishes, disinfect your fridge. Disinfect means radiate, make everything radioactive. That's why you don't want to buy any antiques or old vehicles, because you use this radiation spray called radium spray. These are sadistic monsters. This industry is a sadistic, despicable, evil monster. And what else could you possibly call it besides a sadistic, evil monster? How can you not call it what it actually is a homicidal maniacs, a bunch of disgusting parasites hid behind the shelter of radiation therapy when it's just murder. It's outrageous. It's outright murder. Using radiation on a human or an animal is murder. That's murder. And they got millions and millions and millions of studies showing you it don't work. But the average person never gets to see that. So they'll bring their loved ones and say, well, I love you. Good luck. It's okay, honey. And oh my, they'll kidnap your child here in Canada. And they'll give the child $900 worth of radiation, chemo radiation included. And so when the child is finally dying from all the radiation, they'll send him home because they don't want to look him at him no more. You gotta free up that bed so they can get in some other victim and murder them. Microwave-induced brain injuries. Radiation is the most insidious thing to do to a human. It shows the industry's contempt that they do this in all the hospitals. You have no idea. And I'm only showing you a fraction of a fraction of a percent of a percent of a percent of a percent. This industry has zero redeeming qualities. And then you radiate your food, take all the nutrition out of it, all the microbes out of it that you need for your gut. Kill all that. So it doesn't rot, see? Oh, yeah, no, it's like McDonald's where it'll sit there for 2 years and it won't even change color or shape or nothing. It has no... Canada's been selling GMO for 99% of its supermarkets is GMO. Everything canned on the shelf is GMO. The industry just has no redeeming qualities whatsoever. Its entire ideology is how do we murder everything on this planet. The best way is fuel pools. They're always splitting atoms, invisible plumes covering the entire planet all day long from 1,000 fuel pools worldwide. It's brilliant, really, because people are incapable of comprehending it, right? The harm, the danger that they're in, and the body responds to radiation absorbed. When you get the radioactive, man-made radioactive anthropogenic atoms in your body attacks it, each one of them, for the rest of your life with white blood cells. And each one of them are pulsing energy at the speed of light. So if you're bird, mammal, animal, it doesn't matter. So the body has to try to repair the damage every second from the pulse of energy almost at the speed of light, wrecking chromosomes, DNA, and cells, and has to attack the source and try to build a tumor around it. How do you think that's going to turn out long term? As you bioaccumulate at its worst, you're producing more white blood cells than red blood cells. They call it that leukemia too, right? Does the fight against climate change need nuclear power? Peter Dickhead and Tom Scumbag, Socialist Party. There's so many sadistic monsters. We can't keep up with it. You can't cover a 24-hour news cycle because all you're going to do is challenge their lies or just point out their lies and move on to the next degenerate monster. You can't keep up with it. It does not emit carbon dioxide. And so if you keep selling that lie, eventually people buy into it, right? It's simply the main driver of global warming is radioactive fallout. These are plumes covering your entire planet, pulsing energy. Think of a snowstorm. 20 days later, the snowstorm covers the whole planet. The snow never melts and never stops snowing. You would get it right quick then, wouldn't you? But it's radiation, so you can't see it or smell it or hear it or feel it or taste it or touch it or pick it up or throw rocks at it or perceive it. And it covers your whole planet, and instead of a snowflake, it's an anthropogenic man-made atom. Cesium, uranium, plutonium, americium, neptunium, strontium, curium, whatever. And each one of them are pulsing energy at the speed of light every second. And even worse, you got gammas and alphas, neutrons and betas doing that. And when they hit each other, gammas, neutrons, betas, and alphas, they don't mingle. They hit each other almost the speed of light, and they hit each other, they clap, and they change direction. That's known as an X-ray, a Bremsstrahlung effect. It was discovered by a German scientist. We call that an X-ray. So every species in your forest, your meadows, the biota, the most important elements of our ecosystem have been destroyed through that's just gamma shine and neutron bombardment, beta rays, alphas, but X-rays also. You can't have a planet anymore once you set this stuff loose on your planet. Prominent environment writer George Monbiot. Prominent serial killer. It doesn't make sense. That's what calling George Monbiot a prominent is the same thing. Changed his position on nuclear power 15 years ago. Yeah, the day after Fukushima started melting down, he became pro-nuclear. We've covered him. We got his material gathered up over the years. We can now point to Britain's pro-nuclear change in policies and that of other governments to support his case. What, really? Just because a bunch of pro-nuclear is in influential positions to make the decision that a whole country supports it, really? How come I only got 15 likes? Like an hour and 30, almost an hour and 40 minutes. I don't know if we're an hour and 40 minutes, but we're quite a ways into the show. Yeah, we're an hour and a half into the show. Well, I started early, right? Dun, 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 dun. Yeah, I got busted again tonight. Look at this. No views again. Back to the old routine. China, for instance, has significantly stepped up its nuclear program. Yeah, because they're a communist, you stupid retard. Also, support from the nuclear appears to be spreading to some extent among activists on the socialist left, in particular among younger activists. Yeah, well, where's your examples? You got a couple of morons? A fake movement? Is that what that one is? If anybody watches these shows, they're no longer pro-nuclear, unless they're fucking stupid or a scumbag or both. It is claimed that because global warming is correctly seen as the major threat facing the planet, because of 80 years of emissions. That's why we got global warming. 80 years of emissions from the nuclear industry. It never goes away. It's all pulsing energy for millions of years. You got 1,000 fuel pools releasing, each of them releasing a plume all day long. And like the plume we're talking about will cover the country in 24 hours, if the wind is right. Pulsing energy for the speed of light for millions of years. Gas, oil, and coal emissions don't have those attributes. Carbon produces more birds, more insects, more puppies, more pizzas. Risks associated with nuclear power can be justified. And when anybody puts George Monbiot on a pedestal, is a sadistic, disgusting, parasitic creature. Nuclear radiation is the most carcinogenic thing that exists, period, bar nothing. A single atom in your body pulsing energy almost at the speed of light. Your body will attack it with white blood cells and build a tumor around it. It could take a year, it could take 20 years, it could take 50 years, but eventually they're going to get a tumor. But that's not what we're dealing with. We're talking about huge bioaccumulation. And every atom, anthropogenic man-made atom in everybody's body and birds and insects and everything else is under siege for the rest of their lives. Their bioaccumulation is constant because there's so much now into the environment, and Fukushima being a pulse of it. Japan's author, extreme increase in mortality caused by cardiac diseases. The death rates might give the creeps to some people. That's right, it's not just cancer. 35.8% is Fukushima children with tumors on their thyroid glands, which, produces radioactive hormones and are developing for 25 years of their life. 13,646 out of 38,200 used to be 1 in a million. So in other words, it's 358,000 out of a million when it used to be 1 in a million. This is 2012. This is 1 year later, for goodness sakes. There was 865,000 extra cancers in that same first year too, not counting those kids, Nuclear radiation is the most carcinogenic thing that exists, bar nothing. And we covered the whole fucking planet with it. Risks associated with nuclear power can be justified, said a disgusting parasite. 50 atoms a kilogram. In order to have a Becquerel, you need an atom. The atom pulses energy, the isotope pulses energy at the speed of light every second. That's the Becquerel. Right, it's an explosion, a symmetrical explosion in every direction. So 50 atoms a kilogram in humans lead to irreversible lesions in the vital organs. What do you think that means? If it's going to be true for humans, it's going to be true for elephants. It's going to be true for whales. It's going to be true for seals, or it's going to be true for snakes. It's going to be true for any species. But it's much more pronounced in the smaller species, right? And children. Children, 11 atoms per kilogram. Well, 50 atoms per kilogram is permanent holes in their hearts, or permanent heart damage. Because radiation material from the reactors is 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. Like explosions going off in your cells and blows holes in your DNA every second for the rest of your life. Your body tries to repair that, it can't. So you have all these broken cells in DNA, they'll cause cancer on their own. Not just the radiation. Risks associated with nuclear power can be justified. Yeah, only if you're a monster and you lie every facet of the way. Since they are significantly less than those linked to climate inaction. So the person that wrote this story is a sadistic, serial-killing monster. Nuclear power generation has two major sources of risk, from future accidents and from storing spent radioactive material. The spent fuel is what they're talking to, but they refuse to call it what it is splitting atoms for millions of years. Once you take the reactor core out, it's still splitting atoms. And there's nobody on the planet, no species on the planet with an autoimmune trigger that can defend against those atoms. So it's catastrophic to everything with replicating cells. There is controversy over the extent of danger caused by the release of radioactivity. Well, like, what do you mean controversy? There's a controversy over the extent of the danger caused by the release of radioactivity. He said, however, the majority of the waste is low level. The fuel pools are splitting atoms. at the same rate they would for millions of homes and businesses forever. So when you take them out of the reactor core, there's no containment. Not that the reactor is 100% containment. George Monbiot makes the point that at the nuclear accidents mentioned here, relatively few casualties occurred. This is outrageous to suggest that. Let me give you one example. I don't understand, as a society, why these people are allowed to say stuff like that when it's completely, it's catastrophically dishonest. There's 865,000 cancers in the first year. Across the whole country. There's 14,200 children out of every 100,000 children need open heart surgery, for goodness sakes, when they're born, in neonates and infants. 6 in 10 Fukushima children have diabetes, for goodness sakes. So when they say there's very little known, this is one of the worst lies. Let me show you some of these studies. They know everything about radiation, man-made radiation. They know everything about it. They got millions and millions and millions of studies just in North America. There's nothing they don't know about it. There's nothing that they don't know about anthropogenic man-made radiation. There is, as you can see with these studies, there's nothing, and I mean nothing, that they don't know about radiation. They have studied every biota, every creature, every microscopic creature, every bird, every insect, every animal, every man, every tree, every plant, every fungus, every insect and spider. They've studied every species and every microscopic species on the entire planet, everything in the lakes and the rivers and the estuaries, and every species, bar nothing, over and over and over. And nothing has an autoimmune trigger to defend against it. They know everything about it. And so when they come out and tell you very little is known about low-level radiation, the person who wrote it is the worst human conceivable, / anybody in the nuclear industry. The nuclear industry's entire legacy is predicated upon deceit, dishonesty, deception, bald-faced lies. At Chernobyl, the worst. How can you say Chernobyl is the worst disaster? Fukushima reactors, Chernobyl was a brand new reactor. It was a small reactor. It was a graphite reactor. These are pure uranium, pure plutonium reactors. There was 4 of them. There was 8 reactor cores at the top of each of the buildings and 2 fuel pools. That's 36 reactor cores. Each reactor core, because it's pure uranium, pure plutonium, it was equal to about 100 Chernobyls. You lost 3,600 Chernobyls. But it's even worse because these reactors, like reactor 3 was a plutonium mixed oxide reactor on top of that. You're naughty, naughty people. They're just naughty people. No, actually, they're just evil. There's nothing you can do about it. That's who they are by nature. That's why they got the job. They didn't get the job by accident. They got the job because they were discovered in universities as just being creepy, unconscionable, sadistic little creatures. I'll give it up right there, I guess. So we have 17 likes tonight. What the hell is that all about? How can you have only 17 likes on a show I've been doing straight for over a decade, 5 days a week? If I'm not doing research expeditions, we're doing shows. I'm very consistent. One of the few things I can say about me is I'm very consistent. Okay, last chance. Has 80 years of radioactive fallout from 1,000 fuel pools destroyed Earth's ability to produce and sustain life? Oh, that's why got no views tonight. That's why I got no thumbs up on my videos. You know what, that going out there. I must have scared the shit out of him last night's video. James put out an amazing video last night. It was one of his projects. nuclear site operations soundscape. And so he was trying, I don't know 100% what he was, I have to ask James, but my take on it was he was trying to give you, at least with me anyway, I felt like I was at the nuclear site for the first time in my life. And the sound like of that rushing water, because each reactor needs 4,500 tons a minute. And like, 'cause we talk about this, but we can't visualize it and we can't hear it. And so last night when I was listening to that, we were about halfway through it, I realized what he was doing. I put on one of his other songs in the background because I thought it'd be really cool, and it was. I felt it was really good. Right, the combinations of it, because people, I knew there was a lot of people on the show last night. There was 240 shown on my side when the show was over. It came by the video. We're going to play Pink Hydrogen tonight. It's another James Lucid song. No, we're not. No, I'm sorry. He's got a new video out. Just kidding. He's got a new video out. I forgot about that. A little stupid there tonight. I'm pretty burnt out this week. I don't know what the hell is wrong with me. I'm like, we went through a lot in the last couple of months. The last couple of months has been pretty rough. And, I'm still here, thank goodness. The industry tried to get rid of me the last couple of months. They're pretty sneaky. So radioactive 2x4s. Now, he's probably linked to a story below that I haven't seen. So you have to go over to his site, James Lucid. And underneath his video, he typically got a link. Like that one there's got a link to it. This one here's got a link to it. I don't know yet because I haven't clicked on it, but I'm pretty sure he's got a link to this story. Radioactive 2x4s. We got headlines where they should chop down all the forests in Fukushima Prefecture because everything is so radioactive. So I don't know if it's something to do with that or somewhere else. But you got to realize the forests are bioaccumulating the radioactive fallout worldwide. So every time you have a forest fire, you're getting radioactive fallout from all the way back to nuclear bomb, to the nuclear war. They call it bomb testing, but it's nuclear war, same radioactive fallout, same bomb. So it could be that. I don't know. I'm looking forward to hearing it. Don't forget, if you make it this far in the video, give us a thumbs up. It costs very little. You might make the world a better place. It could happen. Have a great night. Hugs for everybody. We'll see you. Tomorrow's Thursday. I'll try to do a show tomorrow night. Like, I run on auto mode. It takes me all day to put this together. And then I do my shows around, 10 p.m. at nighttime, my time. And they're typically over at midnight. I do that so there's no background noises. And it's easier to concentrate. And it works for, the Northern Hemisphere as a time frame. I don't know if it works perfect, but it's better than me doing it in the daytime because most people are at work and everything else. Have a great night. Take care.
Go to go.
了解、問題なし。倒れる
Cedar boys from Fukushima, grown in nuclear no-go zone, size to fit the 2x4s, right, shipped and stacked for U.S. housing. Design values mark the grade line, 2x4 becomes the passport, partnership to sell this wood, ship it into subdivisions. Fukushima left off, exports set the pace.
UN.